Hey everyone, it's Heather with Tropica, Exotica, and today I'm going to continue my discussion on my own personal spiritual awakening process, and today I'm going to focus on the psychic experiences that I had. So when it comes to psychic abilities, a lot of times people think that, these are special gifts that only certain people have, but in actuality we all have those. It's just a matter of understanding what your belief systems are, understanding that, your pineal gland could be calcified. And I won't get into exactly the details on pineal gland calcification, but you can always look that up. But another thing is, you just think that, that's not something that I experience or I have. But we all have these capabilities. It's just a matter of being open up to them. And so when it comes to these abilities, one of the things that you want to try to do is you want to evaluate your belief systems and look and see, am I blocking these abilities? Another thing that you can do is you can meditate. That will really help you focus and open up your pineal gland. Another thing that you can do is work with spiritual teachers. They usually have tools and techniques that you can use in order to open up these gifts. And so, what exactly are these psychic abilities? So let's talk about them. They kind of have a lot of long names. But basically, if you are somebody who feels, then you would have the skill clairsentience. And so these are your empaths. So these are people that feel the emotions and feelings of others. If you see, that means you have clairvoyance. And so these are people that can see images that can be in their mind's eye, or it can be something that they actually see with their physical eyes. And then if you just know something, that's considered claircognizance. So you might meet a person and get information about them. Maybe you feel like it's intuitively, you just know things. If you hear, that's going to be considered clairaudience. Hopefully you can see this. So these are when you're hearing beings. It could be entities, and it could also be your spirit guides. And then to smell, that is called clairolfactance. So these are not all of the psychic abilities out there, but these are kind of the main ones that people talk about. So we'll get into these a little bit more later. So I thought I would go into my own personal experiences and see if that might help some other people that are going through this. So as I've taught before in another video, one of the first things that I started to experience was I started to see these black and white cloud type swirls. And this is with my eyes closed and also with it opened. And they were just swirling around, and they would have a focus center, and then as they got further out they would be more diffuse, but they just keep on swirling and swirling around each other. I don't really know exactly what that is. All I can think of is that it's the yin and yang energy, the divine masculine and divine feminine. Another thing that I started to experience was hearing what seemed like static, like I was in between radio stations, like I could kind of hear, but I couldn't quite understand exactly what was being said. And so I've since learned that what you can do is you can try to just imagine turning a knob, and as you do that, that might help you focus the sound so that you can hear it better. And then I also started smelling these random smells, and so that is probably one of the ones that's not as common. But these are things that you smell, and there's actually nothing in your external environment that would, indicate that would make sense. And so some of the things that I ended up smelling were mint, basil, bubble gum, fresh baked cookies. I smelled poop. That was really weird. Cigarette smoke, sage burning, and I think that's about it. And then another thing that I started to experience was I started to feel energy. So I started to experience like these external energetic rushes come through me. And it felt like it was kind of like in a physical body form, but they would just kind of go through my body. And then another thing that I started to experience was I started to feel like somebody touching me. And I talked before about this also. It felt like, you know, somebody's energy is real close to you, and sometimes you would feel like an actual goosebumps raise up. I'll try to include a picture of this if I remember, because I took a picture of one recently. For the most part, those should be your spirit guides letting you know, giving you affirmation on something that you were just thinking. So they lower their vibration in order to meet yours just a little bit in order to provide communication. It's called truth bumps. But sometimes I think other people's energy kind of sticks to you, and so I sometimes feel like I feel other people's energy after I've interacted with them as well. And so another thing that I started to experience was I started to hear voices, so people talking, and that was probably very disconcerting at first. So I remember I was lying in bed and I heard this person like talk right in my ear, say, you know, F you. And, you know, it's kind of like, okay, I don't know what that was about. And then another time I heard another person in a British voice say hello. Other things that I've heard during that initial awakening process was I would hear what sounded like doors opening into another dimension. Another thing that I heard was what sounded like a toilet lid slamming down. And what was funny about that one was that later I actually ended up hearing that in a hotel room in Fort Lauderdale. So I don't know if the walls were just really thin, but I remember hearing this toilet lid slam down, and I was thinking, well, that's really funny because I actually heard that several months before. So another thing that I've experienced, and this one is a little bit different, but I actually have a portal in my house. It's in the guest bedroom closet. And so when I first moved into this house, I realized that there was just something off about the energy in this area. And so I ended up asking a psychic about it later, and they said that that was a portal. And so I was in my guest bedroom trying to go to sleep, and all of a sudden I heard something walk across the attic. Like I heard very heavy footsteps, like something very, very heavy. It wasn't an animal, it wasn't a raccoon or anything. And so it was super, super loud. And I remember thinking, you know, I was totally expecting to see somebody walk through the closet, just open up the doors and walk into the bedroom because it was that loud. But for some reason I wasn't scared at that point. I think, I don't really know why, but I guess I wasn't feeling any kind of super bad energy from them. But I found out later that that was just an earthbound spirit as opposed to a negative entity. So, you know, I probably just realized that that was just a harmless ghost, basically. So another experience that I had that was kind of disconcerting also was I started to see these black shadows. So I remember going to sleep at night and I saw this black shadow just kind of shoot down the side of the bed, and it was kind of startling. And so then later I saw one kind of just rush across my stomach, and you know, I think I was trying to get my phone or something, and so I could see it. And so then later I went into the bathroom and I saw this black kind of little shadow figure up close to the ceiling. And I had seen it there before, but as soon as you look at it, like, then it would go away and you couldn't see it. So at about this same time, I started going to see some energy healers. And so I had gone to acupuncture, and then I ended up going to a Reiki practitioner. And after the session, the Reiki practitioner told me, she said, you know, you had 2 negative entities attached to you, but I've since asked them to leave. And so I remember thinking, oh my gosh, wow, I've seen these things. I didn't realize that they were actually attached to me. So I think what happens during the spiritual awakening process is that your light, your energy raises to the point that you become visible to beings in other realms. And so when it comes to negative entities, they're not connected to source, and so they feed off of your energy. And so I think that they kind of just attach to you in order to get energy. However, these actually, when I look back, although it was startling at first, when I look back, they were actually pretty mischievous. So, you know, I think they were just kind of being playful or whatever, but at the end of the day, you don't want them in your energy field because they can drain your energy. And so then another experience that I had that was actually very traumatic. I was in my guest bedroom, and because, you know, when you begin the spiritual awakening process, you can't sleep, and so I ended up going, I would go from my bedroom to my couch to the guest bedroom. You know, I would just play this kind of rotating sleeping arrangements. And so I was upstairs in the guest bedroom, and I heard these claw steps. Now, a lot of times when you experience stuff, you will be what's called in the hypnagogic state. And the hypnagogic state is when you're kind of half asleep, half awake. And so you're aware of your surroundings. So at that point, I was aware that I was in my bed and that something was walking down the hall. I could hear claw steps. And I remember thinking, okay, well, that doesn't make sense because I blocked off the stairs so the dog couldn't come up here, and I have wooden floors on the upstairs. And so then all of a sudden, it's like I was pinned down, I couldn't move, and I would see this black shadow, this large black shadow, probably about 3 or 4 feet long, and then it kind of had like a roundish head. It was just going back and forth across the ceiling, and I was like, oh my gosh, I was like, I can't move. What is this thing? And so I don't know why, but for some reason I got the impression it was kind of like a bat. Like it seemed like it had a bat-like energy, but it didn't have wings. So I don't know why I got that, but it kind of had like the body of a bat. And I was sitting there, I was like, I can't move, and this thing is just going back and forth across the ceiling, and I'm freaking out. Like in my mind, I'm sitting here asking, Jesus, you know, Archangel Michael, somebody help me, you know, and nobody was helping me. And I was like, okay, this is ridiculous. I don't understand. I can't help this. I'm freaking out. So eventually I woke up, and when I woke up, I was breathing so hard. It's like I had been running for 5 miles. So that experience was very traumatizing. I honestly couldn't even talk about it for 3 or 4 months after that without getting anxious and freaking out and getting upset about it. It scared me that much. Now, when I look back, I've actually had worse experiences than that, but I haven't actually, you know, I think as you start this process, you have different experiences, and as you start to understand them, you operate in fear less. But when they first start happening to you, it's very traumatizing, and you don't understand what's happening, and you don't know how to control the situation, and so it can be very, very distressful. So, so for that, I'll talk a little bit about some of my recommendations in just a little bit, but I want to go ahead and continue on with a few other things that you may experience as you start to spiritually awaken. So, one of the things that you may experience is what's called out-of-body experience or astral traveling. So what this is that basically you have an astral body, and this astral body will leave when you're sleeping. And so what it feels like, it's like a dream, but at the same time you're aware of it, and you are aware that you are not limited by your body, you're just flying. And so they're actually really cool, but I haven't had one, and it's been several months since I've had one. But I want to tell you about this one experience so that if you start to have them, you'll understand what they are. So in this particular one, I was going through this gray tunnel, and this gray tunnel had all of this writing on it. And I remember coming up to it thinking, oh, this is awesome. These are the Akashic Records. I've always wanted to read the Akashic Records. So the Akashic Records, in case you don't know, they are the facts and just everything that's ever happened to you as a soul. So it's an actual record. And so some people have the ability to access these records with permission. So I wanted to see what my record said, and so I remember being excited. And so as I went up to this wall with this writing, there was like a light flashed on the writing, and I was starting to look at it, read it, but then as soon as I started to, I got whisked away somewhere else. But when I came back to my body, I remember doing this funny little loop around my body before I went into my body. As I went into my body, I started sliding down towards the edge of the bed, and I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to run into my dog, because my dog was sleeping at the foot of the bed. Well then, all of a sudden, I felt this physical arm touch me, like this hand, like with fingers, like grab my arm. And I remember being scared, thinking, oh my gosh, you're scaring me, please let me go. Well then I ended up back in my body, and I felt this energetic rush, and it felt like love, like I felt this feeling of love. And so later I asked a psychic, okay, what was that experience? Like how, what was that hand grabbing me by the arm? And she basically explained that when you have an out-of-body experience, it can be difficult for your body to get back in. And so a lot of times your spirit guides will help you. And so that was a spirit guide. And so they were basically communicating that it was them through the energetic rush and that feeling of love. And then another thing that you might start to experience are precognitive dreams. I've had these off and on before my spiritual awakening happened, but it seemed that they picked up in earnest after my spiritual awakening process happened. And so a few of the things that I experienced were, I saw, it's like I had this kind of image or dream of my toe being a little bloody. And I ended up going to acupuncture a few days later, and she actually poked a blood vessel and it made me bleed. That's not a normal occurrence in acupuncture. That doesn't normally happen, so I don't want to freak anybody out if you're thinking about going to acupuncture. And then another time I had a vision of this dog running right in front of a car, and I experienced that a few days later. And so a lot of times I feel like with the precognitive dreams that I experience, they're startling and they usually wake me up. A lot of times I feel that they're warnings for me. So, I feel like a lot of times they're driving. Like I've had one before where I had this image of somebody just pulling right in front of my car down the highway, and that did end up happening. So I feel like it's kind of a warning to you to pay attention. And so if you have these type of experiences, you just want to be conscientious and think about it, especially if it's a driving one that's, that may happen. So just to pay attention. And then, so what can you do about these experiences? So what I ended up doing was I would have these experiences, and then I would take like this kind of list, and I would go to a psychic who had more knowledge than I did and ask them, okay, what does this mean? What does this mean? Okay, what do I do next time? What do I do this time? And so that was very helpful for me. And so over time, the combination of talking with different psychics and also following psychics and listening to their videos, reading. When you hear about other people's experiences, that's how you learn. So it's like, okay, wait, I have that too. That's what that is. And so that's been very helpful for me. But if you are having a bunch of experiences and you feel like you're really opening up and you're having, people talking to you, you're experiencing negative entities, that type of stuff, what I would recommend, because I, of course, learned this later, is that that's because your top chakras are more open, and so you're not grounded. And so what I would do is do some grounding techniques to try to get you better centered. And so some of the techniques that you can do that I've mentioned before are you can just make sure that you go outside and just walk around barefoot in your yard, or sit in a chair and just have your bare feet on the ground. Do that for about 20 minutes. You can also just be out in nature. That will be very grounding. You can do some grounding techniques where you just imagine a root coming down from underneath you, going all the way down into the earth. That could be very stabilizing. You can also try grounding crystals such as black tourmaline. And then I've started doing this as a general practice, is to just burn sage weekly just to keep the energy clear in my space. I also do an energetic clearing called the violet flame. So I imagine this violet flame throughout my own personal space, through my house. So one of the things that you can do when you're working with spirits is that you can just ask them to leave. I know that when you are first, being open up psychically, you don't feel that confident, so you can always go to some energy healers, practitioners, and so they can make sure that, your energy is okay. But I know it can be difficult when you're first starting, you don't feel that confident, but you should know that you always have the power. And so you just need to make sure that, as you work on yourself, you get more confident in your spiritual abilities and understand that, you do have power. And so you can ask any entity that's in your space to leave. So anyway, I just wanted to share that with you. Hopefully that helps. So stay tuned so we continue our discussions. Thanks again. Bye-bye.